Welcome back to Venkanna English Guru. Friends, we have started talking about history of American literature. And as previously I said, the study of American literature provides an opportunity to look at literature from other perspective. And most of the students, they have a lot of knowledge about only British literature, that is English literature, till 1930s or 1939 and 45. So during till the modern period, but most of the students are not able to focus on post-colonial literature like American literature, African literature, Canadian literature, and Indian writing and English, Australian literature when they are seriously preparing for this UGC-NET or set examinations. Friends, if you focus on these areas, apart from the British literature, definitely there are a number of chances for you to crack this exam. So, friends, as a part of this history of American literature, and where we discussed colonial period, 607 to 1775, the first period, and second period, the early national period, 1775 to 1865. Previously, we had a lot of discussion where we discussed a lot of issues like American Renaissance, American Romanticism, American Transcendentalism, American individualism, and American Civil War from 1861 to 1865, how it actually influenced. We had a lot of discussion in our previous video. Friends, in this video, we are going to talk about a realistic period, a realistic period of American literature that actually begins in 1865 and ends in 1900. Very, very important, my friends. Friends, as I told you, father of American literature was Ralph Waldo Emerson, and the greatest writer of 18th century in American literature, Ralph Waldo Emerson. But whereas greatest writer or the greatest writer of 19th century in American literature is Walt Whitman. And you could find a lot of impact of Walt Whitman during this period, who is popularly known to the literary world as words poet. So realistic period that we are going to talk, realistic period, 1865 and 1900. And who are the popular novelists during this period? So the popular novelists were Mark Twain. Friends, you could see Mark Twain is known for writing a lot of religious literature, who wrote a lot of short stories, essays on religious biblical themes, and he wrote a lot of literature by keeping in view a particular place called Mississippi River. Next, William Dean Hall's Henry James, very, very popular writer, the brother of William James, and how he actually created a concept called stream of consciousness novel, and he created a new type of novel like stream of consciousness novel and scientific novels and other important novels that he actually created. Another writer, John W. D. Forrest, Harold Frederick, and African American novelist and Charles W. Chestnut, popular writers at the time, mainly Mark Twain, Henry James, who very, 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 very important, these two. Next, you can also see these works, most of the works that were written by and these Mark Twain or other important writers, and their works are often labeled realistic in contrast to the romances. So before 1865, literature is considered to be romance, not romantic, and what you think of today, the common romantic. So romances previously in our previous period where I spoke about Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Margaret Fuller, and Nathaniel Hawthorne, and all these writers wrote a lot of literature about romances and where they used their own ideas to talk about their freedom, to talk about their independence, to talk about their own styles of composing literature instead of following certain trends, certain models which were already given by Britishers, and that is considered to be romance. But here, during this period, most of the literature is considered to be realistic in nature. Realistic in nature. Realism. What does it mean by realism? Realism, friends, which refers to describing things as they are. Talking about describing ideas, describing events, describing people, and as they are, as they were. Okay, without involving the fictional ideas of the writers. the the imaginative power of the writers? No. So that is what most of the writers during this period, their writing is going to be realistic in nature, because they described the impacts of industrial war, the impact of industrial revolution, impact of scientific revolution, and the incidents, events, and the things that they have seen, observed. That's it. That is what this literature is considered to be realistic rather than romance. And the popular writers were Edgar Allan Poe and Nathaniel Hawthorne, Edmund Melville, and Kate Chopin. Only one word, Kate Chopin. After Margaret Fuller, another important feminist, American feminist, was Kate Chopin. Very, very popular writer, my friend. Popular feminist novelist. Some realistic authors grounded their fiction in regional milieu. So most of the realistic writers of the time, they used one particular regional novel, friends. When I discussed a novel introduction or Victorian period, uh, as a part of this British literature, where we discussed regional novelists. So same way, during this period, you could find a group of writers. They used one particular locale as the major important setting of their novels, of their literature, of their poetry, of their drama. And some of them, these writers include Mark Twain. Very, very several times this bit was asked as a part of this UGC-NET exam. Mark Twain and used the popular region in most of his essays and short stories or novels. Mississippi. Very, very important bit with regard to UGC-NET exam. Mississippi River. Mark Twain, Mississippi River, and Bret Harte, California. Most of our literature was and located in California. Sarah and Orne Maine, Mary Wilkins Freeman, Massachusetts, and George W. Cable and Kate Chopin, Louisiana. So these are very, and most of the times you could see there are question and there are and items like as part of this MCQs. In one side you will get writers, another side you will get locales or regions where you need to match. Very difficult bit, my friends, but it's very easy if you know some basic aspects, and this will help you to answer that type of questions. Next, Mark Twain and Mississippi, and Bret Harte, California, Sarah Orne Jeanette, Maine, and Mary Wilkins Freeman, Massachusetts, George W. Cable and Kate Chopin, Louisiana. Next, Chopin. We've been talking about Kate Chopin. Kate Chopin became prominent as an early major feminist novelist of 19th century. Very popular writer, very popular feminist. Although only seven of Emily, and another important poet writer of 19th century, female writer, was Emily Dickinson. Emily Elizabeth Dickinson, very popular writer, my friends. And she is also called None of Harmest. This is a popular previous net bit, my friends. This is who is also called None of Harmest. It's a pen name, where we discussed a couple of pen names or pseudonyms. Okay, pseudonyms. So None of Harmest. That is the pen name of Emily Dickinson, who died at the age of 55 or 56. More than 1,000 short poems that she composed in 1896, but most of them were published only by uh, and is her younger sister, Lavinia Dickinson. Okay, that is also very important. She is now recognized as one of the most distinctive and eminent American poets today. And her poetry, but people were not able to understand when poetry was written by this Emily Dickinson. And people understood her state of mind, her intellectuality, and her prosodic features after reading why she was able. And she is a nun, never married due to certain incidents that took place when she was seduced at the age of 12, and that was the major psychological impact that created on her mind, and she's never married. And she is also called confessional poet, confessional, and these poets are also called poets of exclusion. Poets of exclusion, and Emily Dickinson, Sylvia Plath, Anna Sexton, Jack Kerouac, Andrew Lowell, the popular confessional poets of 19th century, and both Americans. Most of them are Americans. Ted Hughes, Sylvia Plath, Emily Dickinson, Anna Sexton, Jack Kerouac. Okay, there are plenty of writers. What is meant by these confessional poets? Are poets of exclusion. These it's a type of poetry where these are the poets who talk about something that should not be spoken out, and they talk about some internal feelings. They talk about some internal disguised and psychological defects that they had been through. And for most of these poets talk about their implicit relationships, extramarital relationships, or experiments with drugs, experiments with sex, where they will have sex with a number of people, and where they talk about in terms of poetry, and where they have uh, uh, and some of them also spoke about their experiments with the drugs. They take a number of drugs, and after having drugs in terms of medicine, where they have different sexual pleasures, and then they talk about this type of literature, and is actually considered to be confession, it's a, and these are the incidents should not be spoken out, but they speak in terms of poetry. For example, Sylvia Plath, she is married, uh, and her marriage was second marriage to Ted Hughes, and for Ted Hughes it was third marriage. Okay, but she talks about how she spent her lifetime with her first husband to the second husband in terms of poetry, which should not be spoken, but she talks. This type of poetry, which you can say confessional poetry or poets of exclusion. And there were a group of poets at the time, because all these are very important, my friends. Who is called poets of confessional poets, poets of exclusion? Who is called none of harmest? All these were net-oriented wits. That's what I've been talking about. Sidney Lanier published his experiments in versification based on the meters of music. And this fellow, who composed a lot of meters of music, and Sidney Lanier, the African American author, and Paul Laurence Dunbar published both poems and novels between 1893 and 1905. African American writer Paul Laurence Dunbar. In the 1890s, and Stephen Crane, very, very important figure, my friends. Stephen Crane, and when I discussed a video, and in a video, and where maybe during my beginning, as a part of meter, as a part of prosody, where I discussed this writer Stephen Crane, who introduced the style that is free words. Very, very important. Who introduced the concept of free words in English literature? And Stephen Crane, who coined the word free words, Jules Lofrock, and who used a lot of literature, and who composed a lot of literature through free words. T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot in his poem The Wasteland, and Ezra Pound, and Imagists, Impressionists, all these writers, Imagists, Impressionist writers, they composed a lot of literature, a lot of poetry through free words. And the first person, Stephen Crane. Next, he coined the word free words. Remember, it is popularized by T.S. Eliot in his poetry, mainly The Wasteland in 1922. Very, very important, my friends. Next, these writers who used free words anticipate the experiments of Ezra Pound. And Ezra Pound also, who composed a lot of literature, most of the poetry through free words, and imagists, Ezra Pound, Hilda Doolittle, Robert Lowell, and Robert Frost, T.S. Eliot, and these writers who come under imagists, and wrote innovative short stories, short novels, look forward to two later narrative modes, naturalism and impressionism. So all that becomes a part of this realism. This is, I think, this is what I want to talk as part of this video. We'll talk about next next topic, that is naturalistic period and modern period, in our next video. And remember, all the time, subscribe to our YouTube channel, share our videos to your friends and classmates who are preparing for reading for and have done their masters or doing their PhDs and seriously preparing for this UGC NET examination. And thank you guys, and we'll come back with another topic like naturalistic period in the next class.